Today, we are going to be talking to Caroline Paul about living a dynamic life at all ages and talk about the psychological benefits of outdoor activity, one of my most favorite topics, and how it can affect the brain, a vital body, a confident mindset, and a longer, happier life. Caroline is the author of the best-selling New York Times book, The Gutsy Girl, Escapades for Your Life of Epic Adventure. I love that. Her TED Talk, To Raise Brave Girls, Encourage Adventure, has been viewed over 2 million times. You should definitely go and watch it and add to those numbers. And she's a lifelong member of the Writers Grotto. She lives in one of my favorite cities, San Francisco. Hello and welcome.
Hello, everybody. I'm
So
really
nice to
happy to be
have
here.
you here today. So, Caroline, your book is just so inspiring on so many levels. And as I told you, it's so well written. It's just beautiful. Your insights and your perspective are so thought-provoking and encouraging to all women who will read this book. So, you have been an adventurer your whole life. Why this book right now?
Well, I'm 60 now, but I was 55 and I remember very specifically, I was surfing and it was the winter and it was kind of big, mushy swell. And there were a lot of men out there with me and a lot of men older than me. And I'm not a very good surfer. And there were no women my age or women, definitely no women older. And I kept seeing this over and over. I kept seeing it when I was skateboarding, I also fly an experimental plane, hardly any women, and yet men my age and older. And I just started to wonder, where are the women? Do they know something that I'm supposed to know? And am I supposed to leave outdoor adventuring behind? And so this book is kind of a quest to answer the question of, is outdoor adventure good for us as we age?
Well, I'm going to be 60 in about a month and a half, so I relate to all of this that you're saying. And I do have some friends who, are in their 50s and they're kind of, woe is me. I'm in my 50s. I'll never work again. My body is falling apart. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I understand that. I was intrigued by the messaging that we get as we age. I was seeing my own friends very disheartened about their own aging.
Yeah.
And again, no women doing things that they had been doing, at least 10 years before. And so this book is a lot of science and psychology, but I didn't feel like I needed to prove that there was toxic messaging for older women in this country. All I have to do is say it, and all the women are like, yeah. But
Yeah.
so I don't dwell on that. But what I did look into was, what does that toxic messaging say? And what does it do to us? And what it's really saying is, you're frail. You better be careful. You're on a cognitive decline. And frankly, you're boring. Your life is going to be boring. You're going to have to narrow it down. Clearly, men weren't getting that message. And then I started to find science that said the way we look at our aging predicts how well we age. That was interesting because,
Aha
yeah,
moment.
now and so what that means is, if you have a negative view on aging, you have a much higher chance of cardiac event earlier, cognitive decline earlier. And the opposite's true. If you have an optimistic, exhilarated view of your future, you will be happier, you will be healthier, and you live 7.5 years longer on average, which is huge.
That's
So
huge.
I know. And
What's not to do? Like, why not take this road of adventure and embracing curiosity and stepping right into that?
well, at first I was like, okay, so the scientists are telling us, embrace a positive view of your aging, but how do you do that? How do you do that when it's so subliminal and so toxic? And I had a feeling that the answer was in outdoor adventure. And in fact, as I began to go on this quest and interview women who were keeping adventure in their lives, and also I was engaging in a wide range of adventures, I saw that the key was outdoor adventure, because I'm going to ruin the book for everybody, but not really.
Not really.
What nature asks of us when we step into it is a direct rebuke to all that messaging automatically. Like, when you go outside, whether you're taking a walk or whether you're going surfing, you are not frail. you do not feel on a cognitive decline, and you're definitely not boring. So I began to see that, at least on that level, psychologically, getting outside and engaging in adventure was going to be vital for us as we aged.
And I love that you're a voice for all women from 50 to 80 to get out there and embrace it. And you kind of mentioned this a little bit, but the quote in the book that I love, "A Woman Growing Old is the most boring movie ever. A bland narrative where the main character battles what? Increasing invisibility, a loss of relevance." I can't talk today. Hard hand-to-hand combat with one's own insignificance. So let's just leave all of that behind and
Well, yeah,
start
because that
living
was like,
and
that was what,
adventuring.
that's what society tells us. That's not what I
That
was.
is.
And I contrasted that with what men get as role models, which is
Exactly.
James Bond villains. And they're all like trying to blow up the world and having long paragraphs of last words, as I say in the book. And yeah, they get shot by James Bond, but look at the way they live their last years. And we don't get that. And so that's thus
Exactly.
our, bland movie.
So let's talk more about the science and psychology behind aging. And let's talk about the 1979 research about aging from Ellen Langer. So it's the counterclockwise study. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Dr. Langer took 16 men, and 8 of them, she put them in separate houses. And in the control house, it was just a normal house, and they lived together for 5 days. And they, were encouraged to wax nostalgic about their past, but that was about it. In the counterclockwise house, they decorated that house to look like it was 20 years earlier. And then so that meant the TV played only, baseball games from 20 years earlier on that date. It was 1979, so 1959. The men were all in their 70s, by the way. There was decorated only with photos of them as 50 or younger. The researchers who came in were instructed only to talk about that day as if it was 1959. So everything was spoken about and enacted and felt as if it was 1959 in the present. And basically what Ellen Langer was doing was she was basically submerging these men into their younger selves, so that, and at the end of 5 days, I think it was, she measured their grip strength, their flexibility, their cognitive abilities, all these metrics. And she said, and I quoted in the book, it felt like Lourdes. It was miraculous, the change in the men who had been treated as if they were 50 instead of 70, and had treated themselves as if they were 50, not 70, as opposed to the men who knew they were 70, but were simply thinking back on their 50s.
And that was in the other house that was happening, right? And
Yeah.
it's so interesting that they saw no increase in any of the things that these other people that were treated equal or like at a younger age. I thought that was so fascinating that it is so much of a societal thing about how we think about ourselves.
Yeah, the way she
But
talks
it can also be inward. Sorry, go
well,
ahead.
she's talking about what she calls them primes. So it's basically the cues we get to filter our own sense of what the world is doing. So what these men were getting were primes as if they were 50. So and clearly that influenced the way they felt in a profound way. And this was such a small study that I think it simply was something that triggered her interest in the mind-body connection, and how our beliefs affect how we feel, not just emotionally, but biologically.
And when you were talking to all these amazing women for your book, did you find that age doesn't matter? And talk to us about that mind-body connection with all of your interviews.
Well, I want to push back on age doesn't matter, because I think it's actually matters a lot. And the fact that, for instance, I am now 60 is kind of great. Like, it is actually a very important intersection in my life where I'm still physically healthy. I'm postmenopausal, so I don't have those high I'm not exactly sure, the oxytocin hormones that we need for caregiving and that really turn our focus outward a lot. Now we have changed chemically, and we also have changed experientially. And all that is really important. So when people say age doesn't matter, it's not that. It's that I don't want to be younger. And none of the women that I met wanted to be younger either. Because frankly, we gild our past, but who wants to be in their 20s? Not me.
No.
I think that we've forgotten just how difficult those years were, and then the stresses of 30s and 40s. And now we're in a unique time. So it's not that age doesn't matter. But it is that the way we look at our age, again, is really important for how we actually feel. And so the thing about the women that I interviewed is that when they went outside, they were activating so much of their exploratory side, their adventurous side, their exhilarated side. And that in turn, basically they were upending their own expectations of what society was telling them and what they believed themselves. And that was so powerful.
Yeah. I think that's what I wrote that because it is a mindset. It's a mindset over age. I mean, realizing that our bodies are aging, in a number, but that our mind can really, take over and say, I'm going to do this regardless of what is going on in my body right now or what's going on with my goals moving forward. I just was with my mom's best friend who's 93, and she gets up every day and she works out on her treadmill and she does balancing, and because she's embracing life at 93 and wants to continue to be vital. And so that was the mindset about age doesn't matter. It's like you can still do whatever you want to do. And like one of the examples you had of one of the women you interviewed said that when she went down to the Grand Canyon, she didn't care if she went slower, but it was that she wanted to experience the Grand Canyon, and she did.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was an interesting question initially, because I wondered if I had simply stumbled upon women who had this natural verve for life and therefore they went outside. But what I began to find was that that wasn't true, that the opposite was happening, was when they went outside, that triggered a lot of this positive realization about what their future could hold for them. So for instance, I interviewed boogie boarders in San Diego. They're called the wave chasers. They're a bunch of women who are between 60 and 80, even 90s, and they go in the water
Amazing.
3 times a week. And I was a surfer, so I have to say I was a little condescending about boogie boarding. Like, what? Is this an adventure? It's really fun. But I was interested because I thought it was a really simple sport that we could all learn later in life if we didn't have an outdoor background. Because I wanted all people to embrace the outdoors. You didn't have to have an extensive background in adventure in order to start now. You just don't. And a lot of these women exemplified that. So I interviewed Lorraine Voigt, who was 60 when she saw the wave chasers in the water and thought, yeah, they look like they're having fun. So she joined them, and she was immediately smitten. She had no outdoor background. She had no hobbies that spoke to her. She's told me, and this still gives me the chills, she said, Caroline, boogie boarding changed my life. And
Awesome.
I was taken aback. Like, how could this simple, activity where basically you do what 10-year-old kids do, you lie on a cafeteria tray and you get, thrown into shore. How could that change your life? And what she said was, here I am in the cold Pacific Ocean. Here I am playing. I'm experiencing play at my age. I'm helping my friends have fun too. I'm making choices all the time about the big waves, the small waves, the cold weather. She didn't feel frail or on a cognitive decline or boring. And so what she had done on a level that was not conscious, by simply wanting to have a little bit of fun and frankly escape the pandemic, because that's when she joined, she had upended her expectations in a way that were so powerful because, and I said this before, but I'll say it again, it allowed her to see that if she could boogie board in the cold Pacific Ocean at 62, which she was now, what else could she do?
Awesome. That's just so great. I love all of the stories because they're so inspiring that you can continue to do all of these adventures outside at any time. So one of the things that really stood out to me about your book was the importance of awe and kind of like what you said about, looking at life and nature through the lens of a child, like that example that you just gave. What else would you say about the importance of awe?
Well, this book was a quest, and I had no idea about awe when I was in the middle of this book. It wasn't until I met Cynthia Hicks, who was 71, and someone sent me a video, and she was wing walking, which meant she was climbing on the wing of a plane when it was flying in midair.
I
Something
know.
I did not
So
want
I
to do.
just have to show you. Look at that. Can you imagine?
Yeah, that's me, by the way.
Oh, that's
Uh,
you. Okay. Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
I
Amazing.
didn't want to do this because I'm a pilot. So why are you getting out of a perfectly good
Yeah,
cockpit?
why?
But I was interested in how a one-time adventure might really sort of trigger our neural system and, give us some new sense of self just once. And so wing walking, very rare from the barnstorming days, doesn't happen anymore. But it is you clambering on the top of a wing and tying yourself to the king post. So I took the lessons that Cynthia Hicks had taken, and once I was really reluctant about it, and it's not wing walking, by the way, it's like wing crawling, wing slithering. It's like,
Whatever. I think it
yeah,
all
it's,
counts.
I mean, it's
Caroline.
3,000 feet in the air. May I just emphasize that?
Crazy.
You get to
Yeah.
the king post, you attach yourself in, and then the pilot starts doing loops, barrel rolls, and hammerheads. These are all aerobatic moves.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I went from being almost instantaneously from being really surly about this, not psyched, but I have to write this for the book, to ecstatic. And when I got on the ground, I was really curious about what had happened. I knew it had been adrenaline a little bit. I'm adrenaline. I understand adrenaline, but there had been something else. And that's where I stumbled upon awe. And so awe is the sense of that you feel in the presence of something bigger than you and mysterious. It's like fear, wonder, dread. And it's really good for us because what it does, they say it up. I have a quote in the book. By Annie Murphy Paul, who wrote a book called The Extended Mind, and she calls awe
I can read it. I have
yeah,
it
go
right
ahead.
here.
How it up?
It says that when we are awestruck, we become more curious and open-minded, and we become more willing to update the templates we use to understand ourselves and the world. The process of awe makes us feel tiny, even as it opens wide our sense of the possible. But nature's vastness, the unfathomable scale of the oceans and the mountains, and the night sky is a surefire way to trigger awe. Awe is a reset button for the human brain.
Yes. Isn't that amazing? Yes.
Oh,
That was her. That wasn't me though, but I quoted her. So getting outside and being in nature can trigger awe for you. And awe is good for us, not on just a well-being level, excuse me, on a neural level, brain-wise, but it's really good for our well-being. So it lowers depression and anxiety, and it increases gratitude and compassion, which is really powerful. And just as an aside, we live in a world of anti-awe devices now with our phone and our computers. It narrows our vision and makes us feel in control and way more powerful than we really are. So wing walking is obviously this way where you can just catapult yourself into awe because your brain can't really, get what's happening. But they did a great study here in San Francisco where they asked people to go on what they called awe walks, these people were between 60 and 80, and it's 15-minute walks where the scientists just asked these people to look at everything with fresh childlike eyes. So what they were doing was cultivating awe. So this is possible for each of us. We can cultivate awe by simply being in the present moment and accessing like wonder and freshness. And they, after 8 weeks, the awe walkers, as they called, reported much lower rate of depression and anxiety, higher rates of gratitude and compassion, much lower inflammatory markers, which is a sign
that's
of
really
health. That's
interesting.
really important. Yeah. And so this is so basically you don't have to wing walk. Don't wing walk. It's amazing, but don't do it. Just go out on an all walk and access Oh, and this, the cool thing, and I talk about this in the book, was that as an aside, they're like, oh, could you take selfies on these walks? And so the all walkers took selfies. And initially the selfies looked like anyone that we would take with the face in the middle. But as the weeks progressed, the selfies changed and the person's face got smaller and the background got bigger. They call this a small self perspective. And it's this healthy understanding of your own place in the world. We need that.
We totally need that. I think that is so amazing. And
So
I
this is the
also want,
powerful thing I just want to add,
it's
because
so
for
powerful.
me, I was so schooled because I thought adventure was adrenaline, high octane, a little bit of fear, you're learning something new, just kind of this. But I realized in my past few years for sure that really what I had been seeking was awe. And that a lot of people in this book, when they took me on their adventures, they were practicing awe. I didn't realize at the time. I went on a walk with someone who was 93, and she was this hiker, but I begged her not to take me hiking because I thought I was 30 years younger than her, but I was like, she's going to cream me on some steep hill. So we did this walk through a suburban town, and she would stop and wonder at leaves and point out a heron's nest. And I realized I'd been on an all walk with her, but I didn't realize it until I went wing walking because I had all walked earlier. So it was amazing.
I love that. I think the other thing that was so interesting about the piece of awe is that can also increase the emotional well-being, which is exactly what you're talking about.
And resilience, because it
And
we tend to tell different stories about ourselves when we are. And I will say that Cynthia Hicks, the wing walker, she
Mhm.
was the most grateful person I've ever met. Every time she talked, she was like, I'd say she thanked God for everything. She was thankful. She said, I'm so glad I'm so healthy. And she wasn't. I mean, she was healthy, but she had had cancer. She was cutting back on a lot of her outdoor adventures, and yet she remained grateful.
What is this telling all of us? If you would like to put your observations in the chat and we'll go through some of those. So I love how you intersperse the book with the wing walking, the bird watching, and the just walking around, not just walking around, I walk every day, but the orienteering, the surfing, the BMX bike racing with Miss Kitty. And then you talk about the 12-year-old, that came to help. So the intergenerational side of how you find fun. And then could you talk a little bit about your your skateboard experience as well in the park?
Well,
Because
I
I love
started the
that so
book
much.
with this. I was actually going on my first interview, and it was a pandemic. So when I pulled up to the Yosemite Park gates to meet my interviewee inside the gate, they didn't let me in because they said, "Look, your name's not on the reservation. There's a reservation system now. Your name's not on it. You can't bring your car in." Well, I happened to have my electric skateboard, also called a one wheel, in the back of my car, and I asked the young ranger if I could use it instead. And she looks at me, like the gray hair, as I say in the book, my sensible hatchback, the cat dander that clearly is all over me. And she knew my birthday. She knew I was 57. She's like, electric skateboard? And so it was very clear. I mean, if I couldn't have I couldn't have dreamed up a better example of what society is telling us all the time. And I was like, yeah, my electric skateboard. So I grabbed my electric skateboard and I end up, basically using my electric skateboard to go into the park, to the wonderment of all the rangers who had a lot of questions about the skateboard too, but also in their head, they're like, what? And then you could tell they just had to rearrange a little bit of the messaging that they themselves had been given and were giving off.
So I think that we should all get out there and just show people. I mean, even when we were hiking in Costa Rica last month, we're both my partner's 60 and I'm almost 60. And they're like, you're doing this. And I'm like, yeah, we're doing this. And it was so interesting, like the comments from my friends. Now, why would you want to do that? And, it's going to be hot. There's snakes there. I don't like snakes, but, there's all these things. It was like all the reasons why we shouldn't go. And I'm like, all the reasons to go, like embracing, like I want to keep moving, which we'll talk about that in a minute. But I love, Caroline, how your book is broken out into sections and you break it out into spirit, body, brain, and heart. And I want to go through each of those a little bit. And the first one is with spirit, don't act your age.
Well, I was very clear that the structure of this book was going to be important because it's not a series of biopics about badass adventuring women. There are those in there, but it's really about fulfilling aging. It's about the science and psychology behind fulfilling aging. And outdoor adventure happens to be what I think the key to that. And so I realized early on that the structure was going to be important, and I structured it based on parts of the body. So the spirit section is really about that psychology. It's the mindset, it's the spirit, it's the attitude of that we, need, and all that's against us. Because here's the thing that's weird. Like, people act that it's like it's strange that I want to be on a skateboard, but why? Because I want to be, want to have fun. It's a little bit reckless, accessing bravery. There's the exhilaration. Why aren't those attributes something expected for me? Like, of course I'm not going to give those up. That's what I've done all my life. So it's the youth has claimed those, but they don't really get them. They have to share. We get those.
We get
So,
those.
yeah. So spirit is about that. It's about mindset. It's about finding inspiration in other women who are doing incredible things, even if you don't do that exact adventure. It was, I went into each adventure thinking that I knew exactly where it would fit in fulfilling aging because I had done so much research on it. So just quickly, like, what I realized is there are basically 5 things that we need to keep in our lives as we age. We need them all the time, but they tend to fall away as we age. And that would be community, novelty, purpose, health, and that positive mindset about your own aging. And it turns out that on every adventure I was going on an adventure because I had a specific idea on how it would fit, and it would always surprise me and bring something else new. So for instance, when I went, I did a lot on the body because that would be health. And that's a section called body. And I went walking with Dot thinking I was just going to be talking about movement and how movement's really important for health.
And how old is Dot again?
She's 93.
93. Yes.
And what I came away with was a real understanding of the medicinal benefits of nature, which I had known nothing about. It's walking on a treadmill in a gym is great. You can keep doing that for sure, but you need to get outside because what nature offers us medicinally on a biological level, as well as a well-being level, because of the way your brain reacts to being outside, is indispensable.
So I walk every day, and I don't walk with earphones or anything because I think that for me personally, it's so important to wake up with nature and to hear the birds and that we have a lake here in Seattle called Green Lake. And I've been walking that lake for 30 years, 30 plus years. And people are like, why don't you change? And I'm like, I watch the seasons change at the lake and what birds come in and what sounds there are during the various seasons and what's blooming, what's not blooming, what's in the fall. Like I have my favorite tree that is the most beautiful tree in all of Green Lake, and it is just so important to be a part of nature because we're observers so much of our life, but to be in it, even in an urban city, to have that experience is just such a beautiful way to have that in your day.
I mean, it's beautiful and it's working on you in ways you don't know because, I mean, they've done so many studies on the tree chemicals that are really important for your immune system, and then the way birdsong calms your brain waves. And it's really important for our brain to be way more rested than it is now in an urban environment. They found that people who take a walk and then come back and take cognitive tests do way better after a walk outside in nature on cognitive and memory. And it's because what you're doing is your brain doesn't have to filter all those hard noises. It's not in constant fight or flight. It's not looking at the hard architecture of a city landscape. Instead, it's in the undulating, shapes of nature and in the wind and with birds. And so, yeah, on a well-being, it's just far and away the best thing.
So you talk about body and just moving. I mean, one of my goals, at turning 60 is just to keep moving, like just keep moving and have adventure in nature. So can you tell us some other examples of what women took away from, this quest about the body as we age?
Well, I think adaptation was really important because I wanted this book to be available or be accessible to people of all sorts of situations. They're with physical limitations, financial constraints, of different races, of different ages within that spectrum, and of different experiences in the outdoors. And so a lot of these women were adapting as they aged. And so I interviewed Virginia Rose, who was in a wheelchair. She had been in one since she was 14. And I was interested in the way she was getting outside because, as she told me, we're all temporarily able-bodied, Caroline. Soon most of you will be where I am now, if you're lucky. So, and what she does is she has an organization called Birdability, which brings people with disabilities of all kinds into the outdoors. And I went with her because I thought, if Virginia Rose can get out and wheel around and birdwatch, then most of us can get outside in some way or another. And we were actually on a 6-mile bird-a-thon. There's different birding ways to do birding, I guess. This is my first time. So, so this was obviously very physically vital. I mean, she had community, there was a purpose. We were logging birds for citizen science, and novelty constantly, especially for me. And the health aspect was there in bird watching. Who knew?
All of those things, the mind, the body, the spirit, the community, all of the things that you mentioned. Somebody asked for you to say those: community, novelty, purpose, health, and
The positive mindset about your own aging.
okay.
And the reason that so you can get that, you can go to and join a book club, and you will get, but you won't get the physical vitality part. You'll get the community, you'll get the novelty. And so you can learn a language and you'll get novelty, but will you get community? I mean, so I feel like when you go outside, the thing about embracing an activity outdoors, and I found this over and over, that the women who did it weren't expecting the community. They often weren't looking for the community. I interviewed a triathlete because I was interested in how competitive sports might be good for our neural system, keep us sharp as we age, because it's good for kids. And what I came away with instead was, even though like a triathlete is an individual sport, when I interviewed Joan Wicks, she had taught herself how to run by using an app called Couch to 5K. And she went from, she said it would teach her to run a 5K in 3 months. I think it took her 5. But then after that, she kind of got into it and thought, well, maybe I'll join a group, but not for the community, just more to like learn some tips. And she was amazed at how much the community aspect of that really was motivational for her. And I saw that over and over. And I think it's because when you're outside, it's not about chit chat or social mores or skills even. You're bonding using this outdoor activity as the medium. And you forge very, deep connection. What I realize is it isn't just socialness that you need as you age, but you still need that, what they call belonging. You need to belong.
Absolutely.
So outdoor activities offer this what they call a cultural apparatus for a deep sense of belonging, and that gives you purpose as well.
It's interesting. I have found that in our, we hold hiking groups here in Seattle, and it's amazing just on one hike together how deep you can go in a 4 to 8 mile hike. Or taking a walk down together as a group. Like that sense of belonging, like at the end, is just so beautiful. So I highly encourage that. Let's talk about the heart, and you have a section called "Do It Now."
Do it now. Is that my mom? No. I know I wrote about my mom. Hold on.
Do it now. Here, let me see.
Oh, that's the last section.
Yeah.
I mean, I basically, I don't want to give everybody this, like the fact that I have this Pollyanna view of aging. It's all going to be great if you just put your mind to it. That's not it. It's that if you put your mind to it, that's going to be really good for you given your circumstance. And at some point, yes, it is going to be too late, but it's not now for most of us. And that's what I'm urging. So that last chapter is when I go paddleboarding with my best friend. We go look for bioluminescence in the middle of a moonless night.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, continue on.
Oh, well, the interesting part about that chapter is that a lot of people ask me about fear. Fear comes up a lot for women, and they say, I don't know about going outside. I'm fearful, basically. And I'm interested in this because I did write a book called The Gutsy Girl, which talks, and I talk to parents as I publish that book about the way we raise girls to embrace fear, whereas we raise boys to embrace bravery, and the difference that makes in their lives. We ask girls to embrace bravery because we think it protects them. We're not doing it because, we don't care. We think it protects them. We think it'll make them not walk down that dark alley, not talk to that stranger. But in fact, the attributes of fear make you not confident. They make you rely on other people. It's actually way trickier. When you instill bravery in a girl, then she makes decisions for herself. She has confidence. She practices risk assessment, hazard assessment. So it doesn't surprise me that a lot of women my age who were brought up very differently than now have had a life of, where they lead with fear. So I have a game I play at the very end of the book with my friend who tends to be more trepidatious about adventures than I am. And it's called the what's the worst that could happen game. And we play it because a lot of us have fear. It's a very generalized fear. When we really, really think about it, our fears are, well, first of all, we don't really know what we're fearful of, but they don't really make sense. So I ask women when they think they're too scared to go outside to just start enumerating those reasons and see whether they really match up with reality. I think one of the things that people are fearful of is getting hurt. And I will say that if you do not move, you will get hurt. That's the thing. If you don't teach yourself and keep yourself moving so that your body understands that, you have way more likelier to fall and break something. So you do it. Of course, you're not going to just huck yourself off a cliff or get on a skateboard right away. But I found that, what I urge people is if they think going outside is too much, what I ask them to think after they read this book is, I think I've proven how important it is for our well-being and our physical health to get outside. So think of it as a pharmaceutical. And we take a pharmaceutical because we think it's going to make us feel better, despite all those side effects. And there's a long list of them. Like we're going to
many
diarrhea, vomiting, don't drive a big truck. Exactly. And I consider fear just a side effect. So consider it a side effect and manage it like that, and it's telling you something, but it's often not what you think it is.
I love that so much. I'm going to take that because there's been something that I've been kind of fearing about taking this adventure, and I'm just going to go do it.
Well,
anyway.
Do the what's the worst that can happen game. Just
what's the worst that
do it with a friend. Just what's the worst that could happen? Because you usually start off, I could die. And then you do these, you just start to really examine that. Well, you could die anytime, whatever your.
Yeah, well, I have a really interesting example about that, but for another time.
Okay.
So Bonnie would like to know, can I get the answer to my question about the term for a healthy understanding of your place in the world?
The small self perspective. And I think Annie Murphy Paul, no relation, in her book, The Extended Mind, she has a chapter related to this, but there's a lot that also Dacher Keltner, his book had not come out when I was writing mine. All these books on awe were, this concepts of awe weren't as known then as they are now, but he should get his book called Awe. I'm sure it's really good. I haven't planning on reading it.
And then let's talk about the brain as the last. I'm kind of jumping around in the chapters here, but let's talk about the brain and learning something new. And one of the things that I took away from this section was, did you know that our brains build a synaptic connections, but they can create entirely new brain cells at any age. Belief is as important as if your life depended on it.
So our brains, there's sort of a general social sense that our brains harden and we can't learn anything as we age. And in fact, most of us haven't learned something new in a long time. And so I do because novelty is really important for triggering a healthy brain, making it active, and laying down new neural pathways, I wanted to show how going outside and learning something new is especially good, because being outside is always uncertain. So even if you're just going outside on a walk that's new, you're challenging your brain in a really healthy way. It's called brain plasticity, and it's real. So it's important that we keep learning something new. And I interviewed Vijaya Srivastava, who learned to swim at a late age, at 68. And her, like many of the women who had not had any adventurous background, she sort of decided to swim because of an inflection point. Her doctor said, you know, you need to get some exercise. And so she enlisted a friend and she started her swimming journey. And I asked her, oh, well, you know, was aging a hindrance to that? And Vijaya told me, no, it was actually a help, because she no longer cared how well she swam. She didn't have to be an Olympian. She didn't care what she looked like in her bathing suit. And
So nice.
she also realized that this is like her final chance to do this, you know,
Mhm.
she was 68. And when I met her, she was 73, and we went on a swim together, and it was amazing because she swam with joy. Like maybe not the best like stroke, but joy. It was, and longer than I did.
Just talk about joy with all of the examples that you give in the book, Caroline. There's just so much joy. And, you know, because of the community, because of putting yourself out there. I mean, what did you experience around the term joy, and just how women embrace that?
You know, I think when we're young, we need metrics to prove ourselves. I know that I am having way more fun now than I ever did when I was younger, because I don't know, I appreciate things more. There's all that sort of baggage of youth is gone. And so things are easier for me to enjoy. And I didn't want to interview anyone who was really good at anything. I mean, these women, some of them aren't even very good at what they do, but they love it. And that was important to me because I wanted the outdoors to be accessible for everybody, like I said. So yeah, joy and going outside is biologically joyful. And because these women were, and me, we upend our expectations of ourselves each time we push our boundary a little, or we upend society's expectation of ourselves. That is really powerful.
It is so powerful. And, you know, like even going, like what we were talking about going on a walk and just embracing awe, just going back to that section. My mom used to always say, look, honey, look at all the different colors of green. And she saw so many different things, and she instilled that in me in a young age. And I still try to think about my mom. She passed several years ago now, but that element of awe that she had, that childlike um, will to see things that other people would never see. And I would just like to encourage people on your next walk to go ahead and try that. And it's just so amazing. So one of the last things you say in the book, Caroline, is adventuring outside should be prescribed by doctors and funded by health insurance companies. And I completely agree with that. So talk to us about that.
Well, just that, I mean, I think that I didn't know any of the science that I uncovered through the writing of this book, or the psychology. I just knew that in general, outdoor adventure made me feel good. I was my best self in the outdoors, it seemed. So I wanted to hold on to it, I thought, and sure enough, yes. And so and it turns out that it's so good for us on every level, biologically and mentally and emotionally. Like there's just, so one thing I learned, and I learned many things through this quest, and the other thing I learned is that adventure is in the eye of the beholder. So yes, I'm somebody who I fly planes. I was a firefighter for many years. I was a paraglider. I was a rafter. Uh, that's my definition of adventure, is pretty high octane. But what I realized is that bird watching is an adventure. Like the adventure is not in the activity itself, it's in the attributes that it offers you. So when you feel exhilarated, when you feel like you're pushing some boundaries, physically vital, you're unearthing your best self, which is your explorer. That's Virginia Rose, my bird watcher. That's what she told me. That's an adventure. So I did scuba dive with an 80-year-old, but again, I also bird watched and boogie boarded. So it's really important also that you don't have to kind of huck yourself into something and be the best possible. No, it's about your own experience. One of the bird watchers that I interviewed when I went on my adventure with them, he had a really bad form of MS, and he had started bird watching just from his kitchen. He hadn't even stepped outside, but birds brought him outside because he became so intrigued. He moved his wheelchair to the front porch. Then he started installing bird feeders, and then he was on that birdathon with me. So take it at your own pace and see where it leads you.
I love that. I used to, early in my career, I worked with a lot of people who were in wheelchairs that were doing the Boston Marathon, and they were doing rugby, wheelchair rugby, and tennis. And it's like their will to, I mean, everybody's will is different, but their will to get out there and to live life was just such an inspiration to me, early in my career, and that you can do anything you set your mind to. Is there anything, Caroline, that I haven't asked that you would like to share today?
Just that there's some ways to get outside that I think that ensure more success. And one of them is bringing a friend. I think that's what Vijaya Srivastava did when she learned to swim. And I think it makes you accountable, but it also makes the experience more enjoyable. And say yes to somebody who asks you. That's what other people did. When I interviewed Miss Kitty, the BMX bike racer, her son basically said, "Stop yelling me at the sidelines when I race my BMX bike. Why don't you come do it?" And so she did, and she fell in love with it. And so now she's 74 and the oldest female bike racer in the country. And then Cynthia Hicks, the wing walker, who had this incredible sense of adventure and gratitude, she was titrating back on all her sort of habitual sports because of her health issues. But when she went anywhere, went on a day trip, she would type into the internet, "something fun to do here." And she would find what there might be. So she used the internet. So there's a lot of, and then I interviewed a woman, Ilona Aguayo. We went sea kayaking, and she would use the internet on YouTube how-to videos to teach herself her outdoor activities that she wanted to do. So there's a lot of ways to do it. And, but I think accessing that inner explorer first and then stepping forth is the way to do it.
Caroline, this has been so much fun. And thank you so much for the inspiration, for all of your research, for inviting us to read about all these amazing women. And I have to say, I just loved your book. And I know all of you will as well. Tough Broad. Go get it. And
read the subtitle, because the subtitle does actually explain the book.
From Boogie Boarding to Wing Walking, How Outdoor Adventure Improves Our Life as We Age.
Yes.
It doesn't get much better than this. Thank you so much for joining us and
Thanks, everybody.
sharing all of your knowledge. And it's just been so fun. Thank you so much.